Hi gang, and welcome to another episode of Mr. Ed Draws. And in this episode I wanted to redo a previous video, one of my most viewed videos on my channel. I think it's like in the top 5, how to draw a pine tree. And in that video I didn't have a mic. I was recording it off of my phone, and it's not the best quality, and even the tutorial is not as good as it could be. I had just moved to the Northwest when I started doing my channel here, and I moved to the Northwest because I love pine trees, and the Cascades are world famous for their huge pine forests, just go for miles and miles. And the tree that I describe here is one of the large pines. Now this could be a sugar pine, it could be a California pine, it could even maybe be a redwood a little bit. So it could be any one of these pine trees. But when you look at pine trees, you'll see that they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Some of them are like a Christmas tree, some of them are like a redwood, some of them are like shrubs or bonsais. So I decided I would just look at pine trees, and you see there's all different kinds, and they're actually conifers, which have lots of different kinds. And when you look at conifers, you see that they're really fascinating. So I decided I would just look at pine trees specifically to see if there were some characteristics about pine trees that make them quintessentially pine trees. And there kind of is, but as you can see with the images, they vary in shape. They could be anything like you're used to seeing or something else. And not all pine trees. There's firs, there's all the different other kinds of conifers, and they all kind of share the same characteristics basically, except for their cones. Their cones differ, their leaves or needles vary, and their bark varies. How the trunk is varies. And those are the 3 things that you can really use to identify which kind of conifer tree you're looking at. But other than those characteristics, it could be anything. Like a yew tree, its cones look like berries. They're actual cones, they've just been modified to look like a berry. And if you eat the berry, it's poisonous. But ironically, you can use the berry to make chemotherapy drugs to help treat cancer. So they're old trees, they have a lot of use, they're varied. You'll see them in people's yards next to their houses as ornamental shrubs, or you'll see them out in natural forests thousands of years old with people hugging them like these redwood trees. But the whole point of looking at these pictures and seeing what kind of conifers there are and how pine trees fit in their family compared to the other ones, you kind of learn what you're looking at. So when I first started drawing trees, I was drawing what I was looking at, and then as I moved out here, I began to notice the subtle differences between some pine trees versus other pine trees, and then it really got me to researching what am I looking at. So instead of drawing what I see, I went to knowing what I'm drawing. So that's been a great help, because it's helped me kind of define what trees should be in my landscape at a certain place. So if I'm drawing pine trees in a cityscape or maybe in the Midwest, they're going to be more Christmas tree looking. And if I'm drawing pine trees in the Cascades, they're going to be more they're going to be thinner, and the branches are going to be a little bit different. So you kind of want to take those things into context if you're constructing or improvising a landscape where you don't have a subject that you're looking at, so you're just imagining what's there. And before, I would just put a generic pine tree in there, and I always wondered why it didn't quite look right, even though I had other pictures to look at. And when I would go by a visual subject, it would be okay, but there was still something kind of not right, because what I was seeing was working against what I knew, and what I knew wasn't a whole lot. It was just a very limited experience. So if you want to draw well, it's probably best to really get to know what you're drawing on a very visceral and a fundamental level, so then you can interpret what visual elements you need to impress in order to to get that across. So you're not really working as hard. You don't have to describe all the minutiae. You can just do the general shape. So in this exercise here, in this little tutorial, I kind of go over the various shapes of pine trees and how they have kind of a symmetry to them, and the characteristics of the overall tree changes based on just a few things, like which angle the branches are going, whether they're pointing upward or they're pointing downward, whether they're densely packed or they're dispersed, whether that dispersal is more capricious or symmetric, and if it tapers gradually or if it tapers broadly. So considering those things when you start sketching out trees, you get an idea of what you may want to go for in your composition. So I wanted to go over the general shapes of pine trees with you to close out this video. So on the left there you have what really isn't a pine tree, it's more of a redwood or a cedar. And then the one that I'm working on right here is more of a cypress. And you can see the difference. There's this lack of symmetry in the cypress tree, that its branches are more like deciduous trees compared to what you think of in a pine tree. While they're both conifers, the pine tree is distinctively pine tree shaped and the cypress isn't. So you can do those real easy distinctions between the two, but I think it's interesting that they're both in the same family of plants in conifers. So I kind of stick to the blade-shaped trees. Those are the ones that I see most often out here, although when you get into the city and that, you do see more of the ornamentals and decorative trees, stuff like Douglas firs, that are more densely packed, and they look more like the traditional Christmas tree shape, which is triangular, and you typically see branches that go all the way down to the ground. On the larger pines, the blade-shaped ones, especially up in the mountains, you don't see limbs staying on the tree that low to the ground. Sometimes they're cut off just for safety purposes, so people aren't climbing the trees, or they're not getting in the way of people underneath the trees. And then you have your ornamental, like junipers and that, which are the tall, skinny ones you see around golf courses and whatnot. So you have quite a wide variety of tree shape that can describe 3 different locations in a landscape, and knowing the difference between those, and even knowing what a conifer and a pine tree and these different kinds of pine trees are, can help you become a better artist. It's the difference between drawing what you see and knowing what you draw. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Mr. Ed Draws, and if you like this video, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, and until next time, take care.